What is up, guys? It is your boy NCSO7 here. Welcome to a bit of a different video. So, as you can tell from the title of this video, I've played every Pikmin game this year. The Pikmin series is a pretty good series, I'll be honest, and I finally have went through the entire series this year, beaten all the games so far at least, and I figured that I would talk about them today. So, I don't think there's really much else I have to really say. Now, if you don't know what Pikmin is, I'll get into it a little bit, but I think the best place to start is, of course, with the first game, the original Pikmin on GameCube, and unfortunately not the best quality copy of the game, but it does still have the disc in there, and it does work and whatnot, but this is where the series took off. This is one of the very first GameCube games released, and ooh, it is really good. So, if you don't know what Pikmin is about, basically you control Olimar and a bunch of Pikmin, a horde of them that can go up to 100. You defeat enemies and whatnot, and you retrieve objects and stuff like that to progress the story and whatnot. And each game is a little bit different, but we'll start with Pikmin 1. So the story of Pikmin 1 basically revolves around Olimar driving his SS Dolphin through space until he eventually gets hit by an asteroid, lands on an alien planet, and he's only got 30 days to live on said planet, and he has 30 parts he has to collect for his ship, and thus he uses the Pikmin to help him retrieve all of his parts back. I really like the story in the first game because it's very simple and to the point. I just like how basic it is. It's just, here's your situation, go. I really like that. And moving on to the gameplay, like I said before, you use the Pikmin and you throw them around and whatnot, and you have them collect things. In this case being the ship parts that you have to collect, whether the 25 required parts and as well as the 5 optional parts. I really like this game, and honestly, the gameplay is a lot of fun. You can also engage combat with enemies a lot, which have to be kind of planned out strategically so that way you don't lose a lot of Pikmin, because I will say the enemies in Pikmin 1, some of them can be rather vicious, so you do kind of have to plan carefully. And honestly, that is what Pikmin is kind of all about. It is essentially a strategy game, but it's not like super, super difficult. It's basically a game where you kind of have to multitask because there's many obstacles you're going to have to get through within each level in the game. There might be a wall you have to break down and stuff like that, and honestly, rather than just sitting around waiting for that wall to be broken down by the Pikmin, which it can take a little bit of time, it's probably better to just have a horde of Pikmin do that while you do something else with another group of Pikmin. It's really, really fun, and I really like how it's set up. And I know some people don't like the whole 30-day limit because people don't like being timed when they're playing a game, but I think it's just kind of interesting. And besides, you can definitely finish the game in a pretty easy amount of time. You'll definitely, if you're playing the game properly, you'll finish the game within that time limit easily. I've heard of people that have beaten the game in under 20 days, so yeah, let that sink in. And moving on to the levels themselves, I like the levels in the first game. There aren't a lot of them, there's only like 4 of them, and then like one final level, but I like the levels in this game, and I really do appreciate the music that goes with them. I feel like the music adds a lot to these levels. I would honestly say Pikmin 1's soundtrack is honestly pretty underrated, if I'll be honest. Saying that word a lot of times. Sounds like the Impact Site, the Forest of Hope, the Forest Naval, they all sound really good. And even other songs as well, like the title screen theme and like the ending theme, are so good. The music in this game is so underappreciated. But going back to the levels themselves, they're all quite good. The Impact Site is pretty basic. It's basically the tutorial area. That's where you spend the first day at, which basically teaches you the game mechanics. The Forest of Hope, where the game opens up a lot more. I like this area. I like the design of it, but I will say the Forest Naval is really, really cool atmosphere-wise. The music in this area is really subdued, but it's really, really calming. And I also just love the look of the world as well. And Distant Spring is alright. It's not my favorite. It's the biggest area in the game, but it's not really my favorite, if I'll be honest. But it does have some cool stuff you can do and some interesting puzzles. Like, there's one puzzle I know everyone talks about that. For one of the ship parts, you have to bring a bunch of blues into an area across some water, change them into yellow Pikmin so they can get up high enough on a ledge to get a ship part, and then switch them back to blues so that way you can carry that part across the underwater. It's really cool. And how can I forget to mention the Pikmin types? Now, later games would add a lot more Pikmin types, but in this game, you only had three: red, yellow, and blue. Obviously, the red are immune to fire, and they're usually your best fighting Pikmin. The blue Pikmin are able to survive underwater, whereas the others can, and they're also quite good. The yellow ones, at least in this game, are kind of whatever. You can throw them at a much higher altitude so they can reach higher places more easily. They can also collect bomb rocks as well, which can blow up walls a little quicker and enemies fast, but it's just a little weird that they're the only ones that can do that. But I like the lack of Pikmin types in this game. It's just simple, basic. It's not too much to overwhelm yourself with. And also, I need to mention the visuals of this game. And I mean, to be fair, it's not the best looking game out there. Some things do definitely have a little bit of age in them, but I would say overall, this game ages like fine wine. This game, still to this day, looks so good. And honestly, it's not like the Pikmin games were always built off of being the most gorgeous things ever. They're meant around being fun games that you can play, games you can kick back and relax and play. And that's what I would say about Pikmin 1, which at one point was my favorite Pikmin game. I just love a lot of the stuff about this game. I like the levels. I like how basic it is. It's really good, honestly. But there are a couple complaints I do have. Probably the biggest complaint I have is switching Pikmin. Now, later games would do this a lot better, but if you want to switch, say, from the red type to the yellow type, there's not really an easy way to do it. Basically, what you would have to do is disband all the Pikmin into their various groups and then select the Pikmins that you want from said group to use. It's a little annoying if I'm going to be honest, but thankfully it's only really in the first game and it's not in the other games because all the other games fixed it in some way, shape, or form. Another thing is plucking the Pikmin can be kind of annoying at times, as sometimes there might just be a bunch of them and there's not really a good way to speed it up, so that can get a little bit annoying, but honestly, aside from that, there's really no other issues I have with this game. I would say Pikmin 1 is a really good time and it's absolutely worth your time, and also a really good start to the series. Like, for being the first game, they got a lot right, and I'm really proud of them for that. Definitely worth playing. Then, only a few years later, we would get Pikmin 2 on the GameCube as well. And unfortunately, I don't have the original game. I only have it on the Switch, which I'll get into that a little bit later. But Pikmin 2 is very similar to that of the first game, but it's also very, very different in a lot of ways. This one is a little bit more on the mixed side, but it does still have some cool things about it. It does have introduced a lot of things like a cave system and more treasures to get, but this one definitely is a bit more on the mixed side. So the story for Pikmin 2 basically takes place right after the events of the first game, where now you learn that Olimar is actually part of a fright company, Hakatate Fright, which starts going under some pretty difficult times to the point where they really need money quickly. He then takes one treasure that he got supposedly from his first journey back, and apparently that treasure actually is worth quite a good amount. So both Olimar and a new character, Louie, go back to the planet that they went to in the first game in search of treasure. So yeah, this game is basically go get a bunch of treasure and stuff like that to pay off debt. That's basically Pikmin 2 for you. Yes, it's a little bit weird, but this game gets a lot weirder, honestly. Now, one big difference between this and the first game is that this game does not have a time limit. You have as many days as you want to do whatever you can. So, and I know some people don't like that because they want to be timed, but honestly, I'm fine with it. This is a game where you lay back and you treasure collect, and it's not like you really have to be timed anyways. So, I don't see much of a problem with that, but there are some issues with this game. So the gameplay of this game is very similar to that of the first game, where you're throwing Pikmin at enemies to beat them, and then you're throwing Pikmin at objects to collect them. And there's not really a lot to say about it, but there are some things to mention. For one, a lot of maps from the first game are reused, which I know can be kind of annoying. Some areas like the Awakening Wood, which is basically just a reskinned Forest of Hope, is kind of annoying to see because it's basically just the same map. They did change some things up, like the time of day and stuff like that, and kind of the season and whatnot, but it is basically the same thing as it was before, but it is a little bit different with how it looks, and there are definitely some more stuff in this game that you can do. For one thing, then probably the biggest thing, the cave system, which is a mixed bag. If you don't know what the cave system's like, it's basically where you go into a bunch of levels, smaller levels that are basically randomly generated to collect treasures and whatnot and defeat enemies. Basically think something like Mementos from Persona 5. It's kind of like that, except there's only maybe 5 levels or so to each cave. And while I like the idea of it, this game is not easy. And that brings me into my next issue, is that this game is pretty difficult. I didn't even mention difficulty with the first game because the first game's difficulty was honestly fine. But Pikmin 2 is definitely, at least to me, a lot more difficult, and a good reason for that are the caves. You can't get any more Pikmin when you go into a cave, so whatever you bring to start the cave, that's all you get. Now, there are a couple of things you can do in the caves to change the Pikmin, as there are some flowers and whatnot you can throw Pikmin into that changes their color, which brings me into the new Pikmin types. First being the purple Pikmin, which are pretty heavy and can carry the weight of 10 Pikmin, but are much slower. The white Pikmin, which are poisonous and are pretty quick as well, which are honestly kind of underutilized, honestly, and are only used in very certain situations. And also the Bulbmins as well, which basically sometimes when you defeat an enemy, like a commander Bulbin, whatever, you'll eventually get some Bulbmins, which is it's weird, but the Bulbmins are actually pretty useful considering they're immune to pretty much every type of elemental type. So the only real thing is if they get hurt badly, that's with a physical attack, that's really the only thing that'll kill them. The only issue though is that the Bulbmins can't escape the caves, while the purple and white Pikmin can, so they're only really there for a couple of levels. But even so, some of the levels in some of these caves can be really annoying. They can spam enemies like crazy, they can have annoying layouts, and sometimes they'll just have a never-ending enemy of some enemies that just can destroy your Pikmin easily, which it's just not my thing. I like the caves and whatnot, but I feel like this game is a lot more difficult than it needs to be, but there are some other good things as well. The treasure collecting is a lot of fun because the treasures are all real world objects, and sometimes they can be kind of funny, and they'll always change the name of them because since the world of Pikmin, nobody really knows what the stuff that we use is. They try and just make these guesses themselves, which I think is really funny. And it's always fun and sometimes to see a Nintendo product in a cave or something like that. And then even in the original version of Pikmin 2, they even had stuff like a Duracell battery, which I think is kind of funny. This game definitely has its charm with the treasures you collect. And that's pretty much all there is to Pikmin 2. There is more content as well this time around. There is more two-player action since you can take control of 2 captains in the game, which is fun. And it's even got a battle mode as well, which I think is really cool and worth checking out. Overall, though, Pikmin 2 is basically more of Pikmin 1, but in a way that some people may or may not like. Pikmin 2 is definitely one of the more mixed games in the series, as a lot of people either like the game or acknowledge that it's good, but are pretty impartial to it. I think Pikmin 2 is, at least out of the mainline games, probably the worst one, but it also has a lot of good ideas. I think the cave system is a really cool idea, but the thing is, with this game's great ideas, I feel like later Pikmin games would just do them better. So yeah, Pikmin 2 it is a fun time. It does have its charm, but it is a game that is a little bit more on the difficult side. And if you played all the other Pikmin games before you get to Pikmin 2, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult to enjoy it. But it's still fine regardless. And these two games were basically all we really had for a long time, although we did eventually get these games re-released on the Wii, of course using the pointer controls of the Wii, and would eventually get their way onto the Nintendo Switch as well, with both of them being re-released on the eShop and a physical version coming out later down the line. But yeah, and these games are pretty good, and honestly, for the longest time, these were the only two games in the series, but eventually, almost 10 years later, we would finally get Pikmin 3, which would have originally released on the Wii U. But I played the deluxe version on the Nintendo Switch, which is basically just a enhanced, upgraded version of Pikmin 3, and a lot of people have said that this is their favorite game. This is actually the first Pikmin game that I went through and played, though it technically wasn't the first Pikmin game I played. This is the first one I actually really sat down with, and oh boy, this is a good time. I guess the first thing I can mention is the visuals of this game because, I mean, just look at this game. This is very obviously a big bump up from Pikmin 2, at least visually. Obviously, since the Wii U does handle graphics better than that of the GameCube. And while the game does look a little off, as some models are kind of Wii GameCube-like, considering Pikmin 3 was being made for the Wii at one point, this game overall looks really, really good, especially in HD. There's really not much for me to say about it. Just play it or look at the footage, even though it doesn't look the best through the capture card. So yeah, visually this game is absolutely gorgeous. But now moving on to the story, and this game is actually much more story-driven than that of the other games. Basically, in this game, you play as three captains, Alf, Brittany, and Charlie. They come from a planet called Kopai, and their planet, unfortunately, is going through some difficult times with not a lot of food left to eat. So basically, these three set off to a planet to try and find stuff. Basically, in this case, fruit, which is what you find around the world, which is basically how you not only survive, but also get a better ending. But we'll get more into that later. But you also have to try and find something as well known as a cosmic key drive, and which, spoiler alert, Olimar has, and you gotta go after him. So there's a little bit more story to this game as well. It's not just collecting everything. There is stuff you have to do in order to progress the story, whether it's finishing a certain boss or finding a certain place and stuff like that. But yeah, the story of this game is, I mean, it's pretty good. And moving on to the gameplay, it's just as good as it usually is. This is definitely a bump up from Pikmin 2 as well. It's more similar to that of the first game in the sense that there is a quote-unquote time limit. Basically, every time the day ends, your group will have one canister of fruity juice stuff that basically regains their energy. And basically, what you need to do is you need to collect enough fruit, which the fruit is basically the treasures in this game. You have to find them throughout the levels, and you have to bring them back, and then they can transfer that into juice that they can drink, so that way they can eat and whatnot. So that's basically how you survive in the game and add more days. But you also want to try and work as much as you can to try and get it down to like the amount of work you do on as little days as possible, so that way you can get a better ending, so that way there's more to bring back, so you don't go through all the fruit. But that's only if you really care about the ending so much. But getting back to the gameplay, one thing I do want to mention that I really like is switching Pikmin. It's just the L and R buttons to switch between the Pikmin. It's so easy and nice. Pikmin 2, you could change Pikmin before throwing them by holding A and then pressing the R button, but I like it a lot more in this game. Why wasn't it like this sooner? Pressing L and R to just switch Pikmin types is so easy. It's so good. And this game is also a lot of fun as well. It's not too difficult either. Honestly, I think the only real part of the game that got genuinely irritating was maybe the final boss, but then again, it's the final boss, so it's not going to be easy. So yeah, that was probably the one time where it actually felt like the game was getting rather difficult. But I would say Pikmin 3 is a much more fun game to go through. It's much more easy to go through this game than Pikmin 2, for example. There's a lot less BS you have to deal with. And the levels are also fun too. Also, you get a couple new Pikmin as well. While the purple, white, and Bulbmins don't come back, you do get the rock Pikmin, which can break glass, which are really fun. Though they can't stick onto things, they just bounce off of it. But I like using the rock Pikmin. They're actually one of my favorite types of Pikmin. But you also have the winged Pikmin as well, which can fly, which can make carrying objects a little bit easier as they won't have to deal with hazards that are only ground-based. But to be honest, though, I don't care for the winged Pikmin at all. I don't like them. Sorry to all you winged Pikmin lovers, I am not a fan. I think their design is good, but I think utility-wise they're kind of weak and not really the best. But that's just how I feel. And honestly, and there's some other stuff as well. The deluxe version of the game that did come out on the Nintendo Switch did add more content, like the side stories and whatnot. And there's also stuff like multiplayer as well, which is really fun. This game is really, really fun. I don't really have a lot to say about it, unfortunately. Oh yeah, one thing I could say. You can throw the captains, which can make things a little bit easier gameplay-wise, but regardless, though, Pikmin 3 is a really fun time. Whether or not you played on the Wii U or the Switch, the game is still fun either way. It is absolutely worth trying out. Or hell, just get the demo on the Switch if you are on the fence and haven't played these games before. I trust you'll love it a lot. So now that Pikmin 3 was finally released, a lot of people were waiting for a Pikmin 4. There was lots of rumors that Pikmin 4 would happen one day, and for the longest time, we didn't have anything, but we did get one thing in 2017, that being Hey Pikmin, not only the first handheld Pikmin game, but also the first spin-off in the series as well. And this game is rather different than that of the other games, as this game is actually 2D as opposed to 3D, and the game is also structured very differently as well. And a lot of people never really played this game, but I did actually go through this entire game, and I'll be honest, it's honestly okay. I guess we'll once again start off with the visuals of the game, as I think this game looks pretty good. Now, considering this game is on the 3DS, you obviously have the top and bottom screen. Most of the action takes place on the bottom screen, so yeah, it does look a little bit weird when trying to proportion everything for YouTube, but I would say overall, though, like visually, the game looks good. It's definitely good looking. It's definitely not, I mean, it's good for what the 3DS can do. And then moving on to the story, once again, Olimar crashes his ship into an asteroid and lands on an unknown planet because, you know, every Pikmin game has to start with a crash because that's basically Pikmin. That's what happens. And now he has to collect a bunch of this new thing called Sparklium, and around 10,000 of that in order to be able to get back to his home planet. So it's basically a very similar story to that of Pikmin 1, where you basically are stuck on an abandoned planet and you have to go get a certain amount of something and then go. So that's really the story, but Hey Pikmin is very different when it comes to gameplay, as you can clearly see on the screen. So this game, like I mentioned before, is 2D based and is it's really, really different. Basically, you use the touch screen to throw your Pikmin in certain spots, and it actually doesn't feel too bad to throw them around. However, though, this game is level structured. So basically, all you really need to do is get from point A to point B of each level, while of course trying to get as much Sparklium as you can. There are treasures you can find within the levels where you do need to use a little bit of problem solving to get, but to be honest though, this game it's more of just repeating puzzles over and over. This game is not the same as that of the other games because the game uses levels in a world-based structure, which is very different as opposed to the previous games where it was just one big area you wander around. It's all non-linear. This game is really linear, and it's not the worst thing ever, but it's just, this game is boring. That's the best way to put it. Sure, it's different, but it's just boring. I feel like this would have worked a lot better if maybe if it was kind of like a Metroidvania style game. I think that would have worked exponentially better for this game. But no, instead they basically had to do the new Super Mario Brothers to Pikmin and just make it pretty basic like that. Just point A to point B and get enough Sparklium. And honestly, and even like regarding the Pikmin as well, they don't introduce any new ones in this game, but there's not really much to say. You only really carry about 20 Pikmin at a time, and don't really worry about losing them because you can usually go back in the level to get more of them. And it's not like you have to strategize what Pikmin you're going to use for what situation, because the game will basically just give you the Pikmin you need for a certain puzzle. So it's not like there's really much strategy involved at all. And that's kind of one of the things about this game that's not as good, is that there's not a lot of strategy involved. There's also no time limit, so it's not like you're rushed on anything. There is another thing outside of the normal levels you can do, which is the Pikmin Park. Basically, every time you finish a level in the game, you'll have some Pikmin come back to this place called Pikmin Park, where basically you can send the Pikmin to do various tasks, so that way you can get some more Sparklium and whatnot. There's not really much to say about it. It's just a little thing you kind of have to do in order to get more Sparklium and whatnot. But yeah, there's not enough to say. That's basically the game. I think the best way to describe this game is you could play through the first world, and once you finish the first world, you've basically played the whole game. And this game's like 8 worlds long too. It's a decently lengthy game too, and I sat through it all for you guys. You're welcome. But I will say, Hey Pikmin isn't the worst at the end of the day. It's still fine. It's a different game, but it's not really the best by any means. It's not downright bad like some people make it out to be, but it's definitely the lowest point of the series thus far. I think if this game was Metroidvania styled and it worked off of each world, or could being like a big interconnected world, would work so much better. But no, what we got instead was basically New Super Mario Brothers, but Pikmin. At least the music's not too bad, but it's whatever. I mean, hey, we did get some Pikmin shorts before this game, so I mean, there's that. But yeah, this game is honestly kind of just whatever. And yeah, unfortunately, I do have to talk about this game again. But I already mentioned this in my Nintendo mobile games video, but this is Pikmin Bloom. This was the only mobile Pikmin game, at least so far, and it's basically like a game where you walk around and you get stuff that involves Pikmin. Honestly, I didn't really play much of it. It's not really for me. It's just kind of meh. I would say, I mean, I guess it's okay. It's not the worst thing ever, but it's just not really for me at all, and it's meh. Aside from Hey Pikmin, I would say Pikmin Bloom is probably my least favorite game in the series. Yeah. I apologize to all the Bloom fans that I just glossed over your game, but it's just not really for me at all. I'm sorry. But now, after a long wait in 2023, we would finally get Pikmin 4. After a long wait, we finally would have this game in our hands, and what an absolutely amazing game. What an amazing game. This is without a doubt my favorite Pikmin game. This game is just so much fun. If I were to describe Pikmin 4, I would say it's Pikmin 2 fully realized and fully ironed out. Because this game is very similar in structure to that of Pikmin 2, where it's based on treasure collecting in order to rescue Captain Olimar, as well as the other castaways that you find across your journey. Some of them relating to the group that you're trying to find that's related to you, or other people that just so happen to be on the planet for whatever reason they have. And that's basically the point of the game, and you basically collect the treasure in order to get to different areas and whatnot, and I really like it. It's basically just as good as it was before, but this time it's a lot more fully realized and a lot more ironed out. The caves from Pikmin 2 return, however, the caves are a lot better in this game. They're not anywhere near as frustrating. You can actually get new Pikmin in these caves, which is really cool. And I just like it a lot. The bosses are also pretty cool. Like, there's that one boss that many people probably know of, the one where it's the spider with the disco ball. That was admittedly kind of difficult my first couple times, but it's really cool though as well. The treasures are also really cool and funny, just like they were in Pikmin 2, where sometimes it's a Nintendo product, which is kind of funny to me. But the game is really good. And even like the above world areas are just so much fun to explore. You can also move your base as well throughout the levels, so that way you don't have to take your Pikmin don't have to take such a long trek carrying something from point A to point B, which could be really, really helpful in getting everything. And getting everything is just fun in this game because the Pikmin are just so much fun to use, and it's not too difficult either. And speaking of the Pikmin, all Pikmin from the previous Pikmin games return except the Bulbmins. And we also have the new inclusion of the Ice Pikmins, which are very helpful for traversing water and can even freeze enemies for a little bit as well. And I really like them. But one of the biggest gameplay improvements was the addition of Oatchi, who's this dog that is basically your companion. You can ride on him, which I do a lot in this game. I just love riding him with all the Pikmin. It just makes traversal a little bit easier, honestly. It also keeps the Pikmin in one spot, so they're less likely to die if they're in a certain spot. And also, Oatchi has some of his own abilities. He can carry objects as well. He can also ram into things, which can be useful on some enemies and getting through some of the levels, obstacles, and whatnot. It's really cool. I really, really like what they did with the levels in this game. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, there is no time limit and whatnot, but it's not really a big deal. The big deal about this game is collecting stuff and having fun and kind of relaxing a little bit. And that's what I think this game does really well. I also really like how at the beginning of each day, you have a little hub you can walk around, which is really cool. None of the other games did this. Instead, they would just have a world map for you. But in Pikmin 4, you actually have a little area you can walk around. You can talk to people, and this is where you can get the side quests and whatnot, which is really cool. None of the other Pikmin games really had this. So getting these quests where it's like, bloom this many Pikmin, or get this many objects, or complete this many caves. It's such a cool idea that it honestly makes me wonder why this wasn't there in the first place. I don't know why it took them this long to finally put this in here. And I also gotta talk about one big new addition as well, the nighttime explorations. Now, in the previous games, you couldn't explore at night because the enemies would become too aggressive, but you can in this game. Now, the night explorations are very different. You have to go to the hub and then talk to one of the people, and then you can start the night exploration. It's basically a mode where you have a new type of Pikmin, the glowing Pikmin, which are these green ghost-like things that you can use to help refuel these like little bases that you have to keep safe from the enemies. And it's really fun. It's basically kind of like, if you know in Splatoon 2 where there's those orb missions in the Octo expansion that you have to keep the orb safe and whatnot. It's basically the same concept from that game that it is in this game, but this time you have to deal with the enemies, and some of those encounters can get really vicious. I'll tell you right now, you're gonna definitely lose some glow Pikmin. However, when they do die, they don't technically die, so there's that. And you also can't really take them as well with you outside of there, aside from a couple of cases. But I really love that they kind of added this new feature. It's just a nice little pocket of gameplay that I really like. It's so much fun. And also, I gotta mention the music of this game. The music of this game is also really solid. The music's all around pretty good. I love the Hero's Hideaway theme the most. I think it's the one that stuck with me a little bit more than the other ones. And also the title theme. The title theme's also really good too. As well as the jingle that plays every time a new day starts. And also the visuals. This game is absolutely beautiful. If Pikmin 3 was beautiful, this game is even more beautiful. This game looks so good. It is so good looking. This is the best Pikmin has looked for it, in my personal opinion. It is so much fun. Honestly, Pikmin 4 is just an amazing time. It's not really that complicated of a game. And then, yeah, the story's not the most interesting since it's just, save Olimar and the other castaways, but it's still fine for what it is, and each character has their own story, which I think is really cool. But there is one thing I do kind of dislike. It's not even like really a complaint, but it's more of just a little annoyance. Throughout the game, you'll find these little caves where Olimar, who's now transformed into this leafling thing, will jump down them, and then you'll end up doing a Dandori battle. Now, Dandori battles are basically these modes where you basically have to get something, whether it's like collect this amount of fruit in this amount of time, or collect this amount of something in a certain time. It really varies, but it basically requires you to be on your tip and toes, trying to use your Pikmin in the most efficient way possible. Personally, I didn't find the Dandori battles to be that great, if I'm going to be honest. One issue with most of them is that a lot of them, you have this split screen mode, so one half of the screen is your side, which you look at, and then the other half of the screen is for the CPU, and why did they do that? Seriously, this would be one thing if it was multiplayer, but no, this isn't single player, and it completely blocks my vision from the rest of the area. Without having that full scale of vision, I can't really see everything around me, so I personally do not like that. I would have liked if the Dandori battles would have just been in full screen rather than splitting it off. We don't need to see what the CPU is doing. It's not that important. But that's really only my only gripe with this game. Honestly, there's really not much I can say. Despite being such a long development cycle, this game still turned out amazingly well, and I really hope it continues to thrive. It is without a doubt my favorite Pikmin game that I've played, and if you haven't played it yet, consider checking it out or checking out the demo as well. This is definitely a game that is absolutely worth playing. One of my favorite games to come out in 2023. And that was all of the Pikmin games that have been released so far, or at least for the next 10 years more than likely. And to kind of go through each game one more time, Pikmin 1, good time, really, really good time. Great start to the series. Pikmin 2, it's a little bit more on the mixed side. It might be a little too difficult for me, but I do love a lot of the ideas that this game did bring to the table. Pikmin 3, absolutely great, gorgeous game, lots of fun. I like the story of the game as well. It's just fun to play through. Hey Pikmin, it's okay. It's not the worst thing ever, but it is kind of forgettable and pretty boring for the most part. Pikmin Bloom, a game that I genuinely don't really care too much about. And then Pikmin 4, the best of the best. And that is pretty much all of the Pikmin games. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making this. I had a lot of fun playing through these games finally and actually getting to experience this series and whatnot. And hopefully whenever a Pikmin 5 comes around the corner, which that corner is probably going to be a very long time from now, hopefully Nintendo can nail it out of the park. But overall, if you haven't played these games before, I heavily recommend it. They're so much fun. Please do it. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know in the comment section what your favorite Pikmin game is, or what your least favorite Pikmin game is, what your favorite and least favorite types are. And yeah. And also consider checking out my other videos as well for other content that's going to be like this. There's not going to be a lot of content for a while though, because I'm going to be busy with school, but I'll still have a couple of things in store for you guys. But with that being said, I will see you guys in my next video. Goodbye.